Okay, so damage, it's meaningful. We can compare it to hurricanes, which are a lot bigger and more steady, so a little easier to measure precisely. But damage and wind strength do not necessarily match up perfectly. Here's an example. This was from a major tornado that hit Tuscaloosa, Alabama in 2011. And you can see that, okay, roof's in bad shape over here. Over here, the two-story apartments are now one-story. You've wiped out the top level here. Okay, that's pretty bad damage. But, okay, yeah, that was a strong tornado. But were these buildings well built? Maybe, maybe not. If they were flimsy buildings, then a weaker tornado could take them out. So that's a challenge there. Of course, also, is there anything to damage? A tornado, it knocked over wheat in the wheat field up in the middle of Kansas somewhere. Well, will be. You can do that huffing and puffing. Now, it could have been a very powerful tornado, but there wasn't anything there to destroy to show that. So, you do have some challenges there of going from damage to an estimate of the actual tornado strength. Trying to predict tornadoes. It remains challenging. We know they are associated with strong storms, especially if any rotation develops. Developing that rotation, again, thunderstorms, we've got those strong updrafts and strong downdrafts. And with air doing this near each other, you can potentially get air rotating. Now, if that rotation then bends, gets vertical, and doing that, then that could be developing to a tornado. Will it happen? That's still challenging. There's a fair error rate. Understandably, the weatherman tends to be cautious and give a watch, look out, there might be tornadoes. Well, there might not, but better that you are being careful than not realizing and getting hurt. We do know that strong thunderstorms and hurricanes can produce tornadoes, but we don't yet know for sure why one hurricane or one thunderstorm produces tornadoes and another doesn't. We don't have that pinned down precisely. In fact, 100 years back, the Weather Service had decided that we can't predict tornadoes. If we say tornado, people are just going to panic. We're not going to try. However, in the 40s, at an Air Force base in Oklahoma, had severe weather develop and a tornado formed. And the weatherman there observed what happened then. A few days later, the weather looks almost exactly the same. And he decides, I'd better give a warning. I think it could happen again. So he gave the alert, and indeed another tornado formed. And that showed that, yeah, you can predict them to some degree. And so that led to more work in understanding them. Impacts of tornadoes. There are on the order of 1,300 in the U.S. every year. Now, that is an estimate. Again, tornado is pretty small. Went out in the middle of nowhere, nobody sees it. We might not ever know that ever happened. So there's uncertainty with the number. On average, about 60 people per year are killed by tornadoes. Average. Some years get really bad, some don't have very many. And so it is up and down a lot. That's typical average. The deadliest ever for the U.S. was back in 1925, the infamous tri-state tornado. As the name suggests, it went through 3 states. It started out in Missouri, went all the way across Illinois and into Indiana. So a very long path. It was a large, powerful tornado. And of course, back in 25, don't nearly have the weather systems or the alerts to warn people. Tornadoes can get over 2.5 miles wide. They can last at least an hour, possibly more. And that's made very challenging by the definition of a tornado as touching the ground. If it goes along and then hops a little bit, do we consider that 2 tornadoes rather than 1? Where you draw the line, that's complicated. That affects that. The record month for tornadoes so far was April of 2011, with over 800 tornadoes in the U.S. in that month. Winds can get over 300 miles an hour. A tornado hit a weather station and the wind meter made it up to over 300. And so we do have that number, but that does not happen often. Often, if there actually is a wind meter where the tornado comes, it's destroyed rather before that. Tornadoes can also cause very severe damage. The costliest have been over $2 billion worth of damage when they've hit a city. Here's a map showing the areas of the U.S. with the most tornadoes, number of days per year where there's a tornado within 25 miles of it. No surprise, we have a concentration in the classic Tornado Alley area there in the southern plains, up in the upper Midwest, also kind of Gulf Coast. There's somewhat higher numbers there. A lot in Florida. That's not something that we usually think of there, but actually Florida is a prime area for tornadoes. If we look at the medium to severe, however, Florida drops way off. Most of the tornadoes in Florida are pretty small ones. So, I mean, even a small tornado is not a good thing to be in, but it doesn't do nearly as much damage as a big one. No surprise, again, we have the Southern Plains region and into the Gulf Coast as our main area for the more severe tornadoes. But you may notice, coming up in here, we get a moderate number into our part of the world as well. For North Carolina, I found a set of statistics for 1980 to 2009. During that interval, we had over 700 tornadoes in North Carolina, but only 9 of them were F4, F5, the strong end of the scale. Total of 78 people killed by 24 tornadoes. So out of that 758, only 24. Not surprising, the few really big tornadoes tend to do a lot more damage. A lot of these smaller ones, not as much. Around 50 have been reported from this general part of the world. This is an online map showing where we've had tornadoes in the Carolinas into a bit of nearby Georgia. At this scale, it looks pretty awful. But then again, those triangles are kind of big. If we zoom in, then we can see, for example, the tornadoes for Cleveland County. And if you're interested, you can look around and find ones closer to where you are. And then if you click on these individual ones, you can find out about the specific tornado in question. So there's an F2 from March of 1994. This one actually hit campus, did some roof damage to Gardner Webb. And you can see different ones. F3, so more severe there. 40 people injured. A number of different ones. So you can see something of the regional tornado history. What to do for tornado safety? One important thing are to pay attention for alerts. And this includes knowing where you live, what county are you in, what are towns nearby. Alerts will name counties and cities and towns in the path. And so that gives you important information. For example, when I lived in Alabama, knowing where we were, if they reported a tornado near Double Springs, and that's off north end of the county, that tornado is not headed for us. If the tornado is reported as being in the southwest part of Tuscaloosa itself, we're in the northeast end. That's where the tornado is headed to from there. Definitely want to get out of the way, head for shelter in that case. A couple years before I was there was a tornado actually just few buildings over from where I lived in Tuscaloosa. So definitely something to be aware of. If there are thunderstorms around, then potentially there could be a tornado. So you need to stay alert, pay attention to weather updates. You can easily get these, say, on your phone or other sources, radio, TV, all sorts of sources there. Also, sirens will be sounding. Be aware of the terminology, watches versus warnings. A watch means conditions are suitable, it could form, be alert, pay attention to weather sources. Warning means that tornado type activity has been detected. If you are in the path, take cover at once. So watch, be alert, because conditions are suitable. Warning, somebody's seen a tornado or radar has detected rotation like a tornado. Get to shelter. Planning ahead, be aware, is there anyone around, depending on you, that you need to help. Having a plan in place.